L'kuta Sicha is Chelek Chaf, the Sicha of Vayechi Beis, Lili Nishmis Rabbi Yosef Benyamin Ben Rabbi Nasha Kaltman. We are also learning L'schus, our dear friend Yosef Shlema Ben Risha, for a refuah Shlema Ukreva. A very, very Gishmak Sicha that's going to teach us how do we survive Galus? How do we stay in a place where Galus doesn't ruin us? Afan pasuk Vayisu Eisei Banov. The pasuk at the end of the parsha says that his children carried him as the Bnei Yankiv ben Getragin Yaakov's Aron Arza Canaan, that the children of Yaakov carried Yaakov's casket to the land of Canaan. Is Rashi Mevar? Rashi explains the Meseder Vizia ben Getragin dem Aron, the order, the formation in which they carried the Aron, the casket. Kaval lahem mokim, he designated a place, Gimel lemizrich, 3 on the east side, v'chein la'arba ruchos, and so on each side there were 3 people. Ukesidron lemasa machne shel dgalim nikbu kan, and in the formation in which they traveled through the midbar, in the camp of flags, meaning to say each side had a flag, and under the flag there were 3 shvatim, totaling 12 shvatim. Similarly here, they traveled in that same formation. When the Nach is Rashi Mamshech, and the Rashi continues, as Yaakov had angesagt, that Yaakov commanded, Levi leYisa, shehu asid lasis and sa'arin, Levi should not carry Yaakov's casket because he is going to carry the Aron of the Mishkan, the holy Aron. The Yosef leYisa shehu melech, Yosef should not carry the casket because he is a king. Menashe ve'Ephraim yiyu tachtayim, and in their place should be Menashe and Ephraim. This is what Rashi says towards the end of Parshas Vayechi. Darf man verstehen, so the Rebbe's first question is as follows. Wie stimmt das, was Yosef leYisa, mit dem, was steht befehlisch in Pasuk, as Yaakov hat Bashvaron Yosef und es ist an ihm in Mitzrayim? How do you reconcile the fact that Yaakov is saying on the one hand that Yosef should not carry his Aron, when he did say clearly to Yaakov in the Pasuk, you should carry me from Mitzrayim? As the chiyuv from the Nesiyas Tareinu Shel Yaakov is beikir of Yosef, that the primary obligation of carrying Yaakov's casket was upon Yosef, is the Cheder Zichra as a Darf Tan in Dem Kechala Efshari. So certainly he should do whatever he can, including actually carrying it. So if Yaakov Avinu told him initially he should be the one to carry him from Mitzrayim, why now is he saying that Yosef lo Yisa, that Yosef shouldn't carry? How do you reconcile these two instructions of Yaakov? Also with regards to the fact that Yaakov said that Levi should not carry the Aron, requires explanation. The Nesiyas Aron Hayy Levi, the fact that the Aron of the Aron of testimony, meaning the Aron of the Mishkan, was carried by Levi, is the Chan Inyan Sheba'ased Arachik, is something that's going to happen in the far off future. After the period of time when the Yidden will be enslaved and persecuted by the Mitzrayim, by the Egyptians. And even when it's going to happen, it won't be Levi himself. It'll be Levi's descendants. The generation before the 4th generation. Meaning to say, the 4th generation is going to, Yeshuva is going to come back to Eretz Yisrael, and the der before that was Evel and Traga Demaran, or the der that is the generation that's going to leave Mitzrayim, and in the generation that's going to carry the Aron. Why should, because of that, why should he lose the privilege of carrying the Aron? Because carrying the casket of a person at a funeral is a mitzvah, the mitzvah of bringing him to his ultimate a resting place, ubifrat aron shalav, and especially his father's aron, which also has the mitzvah of kibud av. So this would have been a privilege for Levi to carry the aron. So why is it being taken from him just because in a few generations later his descendants are going to carry the aron of the Mishkan? Is the beer baza. So in Siv Beis, the Rabbi gives the beer based on one word in Rashi. Rashi addresses this question as Menashe v'Ephraim yiyu tachteim, by saying that Menashe and Ephraim are going to be tachteim. Der mitmeint Rashi. With this, Rashi intends to tell us not only that Menashe and Ephraim will fill the empty space that is beside the Aron, where there had to be 3 on each side, then we're missing 2. Other to Mashlims and the Misper Yud Beis for Nesi Aron, or to say that the Aron needed 12 carriers, and these 2 would complete the number 12. That's not the intent of Rashi. Nor as they zayin tachteim bimkeimam, they are in their stead, they are in their place. Zeir shluchim, they are working in their agency. Meaning to say that the fact that Levi and Yosef don't carry the casket is only literally with their hands. They did not carry the Aron. But they did fulfill the mitzvah of carrying Yaakov's casket through their shluchim, through their agents, who are kemoisam, who are exactly like them. When their shluchim, meaning Ephraim and Menashe, carry the Aron, it's as if they're carrying the Aron. So Yaakov was told in a society in Mitzrayim, he is fulfilling that by having one of his sons carry the Aron for him. And Levi is getting the mitzvah by having one of Ephraim and Menashe carrying the Aron for him. And that's why Rashi adds the word tachteim to emphasize that this was a case of shlichus, a case where the Ephraim and Menashe, were doing so in the agency of Levi or Yosef. Based on this will answer another question. Rashi begins his pirush with the words It says in the pasuk that his children carried him. It says Rashi, and not his grandchildren. And then he ends the Rashi by saying that Menashe and Ephraim did carry the Aron of Yaakov. So Rashi's contradicting himself, where he's saying in the beginning that the grandchildren did not carry, and in the end he's saying the grandchildren did carry. Unchach, the Rebbe in the parentheses says that there might be an answer, which the Rebbe himself refutes. Unchach, Rashi is mevar b'tchilas perush, even though Rashi explains himself in the beginning. Shekach tzivam, that Yaakov commanded the brothers, al yisa mitasi leish mitzri v'le'echad mipneim shem mipneis Canaan. The people who carry my bed should not be Egyptians, nor should they be the grandchildren of the children of my children, because they're children of Canaanite women. Umenashe Ephraim zayin b'nei Osnas, and Menashe and Ephraim were not children of Canaanite women. They were the children of Osnas, and therefore they would have been excluded from the prohibition of carrying Yaakov's bed. So maybe that's the answer. That when he said, in the beginning, Rashi says, not the grandchildren, he means not the grandchildren who were born from Canaanite women. And then in the end, he says, Menashe and Ephraim could carry because they're not Mibnei Canaan. But that's in the negative, what they shouldn't do. But Yaakov also said it in the positive directive. Virashi firtuis ella atem, that it should be you, my children, and not my grandchildren. Which you, my children, should first include Levi and Yosef, but should exclude Menashe and Ephraim. So how could Menashe and Ephraim carry the Aron of Yaakov? Is given tachteim, but since we just explained that Menashe and Ephraim carrying the Aron was in the place of, in the agency of the Levi and Yosef, not shluchim from Levi and Yosef, they were their shluchim. And this is how the Yaakov's directive of his children should carry him was fulfilled. Does hey atem, does hey is the trogan is which means that the carrying of the Aron is being attributed to those who sent them, namely Levi and Yosef. As the rule goes. And when Rashi brings it in other places in his Pirush Al, which means that Rashi holds that this rule is consistent with the way of Pshat. Shluchai shel Adam k'may, say that the shliach of the person is like the person himself, and therefore Nasha and Ephraim carrying the Aron is like Levi and Yosef carrying the Aron, and therefore you could say Vayisu Oisei Banav, you could say that his children carried him, even though Menashe and Ephraim were grandchildren, but in this specific case they were the shluchim of his children. So as the expression goes, asked and answered. The Rebbe has a question. Why would Yosef not fulfill the Unasani B'Mitzrayim to the best of his ability? And why would Levi lose the schus of carrying Yaakov's Aron? And answers Tachtayim. That Rashi said Tachtayim, they were operating as shluchim of Levi and Yosef, and therefore it is attributed to Levi and Yosef. And Yosef gets the mitzvah, and Levi gets the mitzvah, and that answers the question. Siv Gimel and on, the Rebbe is going to address this b'pnimi yisayanyanim on a deeper level by starting with the question: Menashe and Ephraim, how do they relate to Levi? They might be Yosef's children, but how do they relate to Levi? How do they end up in Levi's place? But on the deeper level, we have to understand. I can understand the fact that Menashe and Ephraim are taking the place of Yosef because children could step in for their father. What is the connection between Menashe and Ephraim to Levi that they should be able to step in Levi's place? So in order to understand this, we're going to introduce a different question, which is a question that the Mefarshim ask on Rashi's words, Levi lo Yisrael, that Levi should not carry this Aron, the Aron of Yaakov, because he's going to carry the Aron of the Mishkan. So the Mefarshim ask, that Moshe carried the Aron of Yosef. It says in the pasuk, because that Moshe took the remains of Yosef with him. When Moshe was from Shevet Levi, Moshe was actually not just a Levi, he was actually from the children of Kahas, which were the ones who were entrusted with carrying the actual vessels of the Mishkan, including the Aron. So Moshe is coming from Kahas, from the family of Kahas, and yet Moshe carries the Aron of Yosef. So if there's a problem of carrying Yaakov's Aron because they're going to carry the Aron of the Mishkan, how could Moshe carry Yosef's Aron? So the Rebbe is now going to give a biur, which ultimately is going to explain to us the difference between Yaakov's Aron and Yosef's Aron, and will give us a deeper understanding into the whole idea of what is so unique about Levi and Yosef that they are not able to carry the Aron of Yaakov Avinu. Says Yodua, it is known as Chalas Hashibud Mitzrayim Yankov. The beginning of the enslavement in Mitzrayim began after Yaakov's passing. Rashi says in the beginning of this parsha, Parshas Vayechi, first Rashi of the parsha, Shekivon Shenifta Yaakov Avinu. Once, as soon as Yaakov Avinu passed away, Nistimu Einayim V'Livim Shel Yisrael, the eyes and the hearts of the Jewish people were closed, Mitzaras Hashibud, from the misery of the bondage, that they began to enslave them. Das heißt, Yaakov's being in Mitzrayim held off the misery of the bondage. So it did not allow Golus to begin in Mitzrayim in earnest. As the Golus from Canaan. All that there was the fact, the descent from Canaan into Mitzrayim. So that happened with Yaakov 17 years before Yaakov passed away. But as long as Yaakov is alive in Mitzrayim, or as long as Yaakov is in Mitzrayim, as long as Yaakov is alive, had the Eden garnet gefällt Mitzrayim, the Eden lacked for nothing. On the contrary, I will give you the best of the land of Mitzrayim, Gomer, Chelev Aretz, the choicest of the land. And then when Yaakov leaves, says Rashi, then the shibud, then the enslavement could begin. Der Fun ist verstandig. From this we understand, dass Rüstem and Yanki from Mitzrayim, bringing him Lekvura in Eretz Yisrael, that when Yanki was taken from Mitzrayim to be brought to burial in Eretz Yisrael, is given noch a shlav. This was another phase in the story of the Jews of Mitzrayim. Had Geirim given as Elkan and Zayin the goes of Mitzrayim, and this caused that the shibud, that the slavery in Mitzrayim should be able to begin. In other words, the Oren of Yaakov represents the beginning of the slavery in Egypt. The feast is moving, but Levi and Yosef and Zechapel Nishmasata given in the Siyas of Mitzrayim. And according to this is understood why Levi and Yosef could not participate in carrying Yaakov's Oren. Why? And the Kudim Mishutef as Gefin by Levi and Yosef, we find a common denominator between Levi and Yosef. Was beides eine given hecher von dem Inyan Hashibud Mitzrayim that both transcend the slavery in Mitzrayim. Beide haben nicht zugelassen, soll sein Shibud Mitzrayim, and both held off the Shibud, the slavery in Mitzrayim. With regards to Yosef, the Medrash tells us, as long as Yosef was there, was alive, there was no burden of Egypt. When Yosef passed away, they were able to place upon the Yidden the burden of the slavery. Therefore, in the beginning of Parsha Shmois, it says, Ve'ele Shmois b'nei Yankov haboim Mitzrayim. These are the children. These are the names of the Yidden that came to Mitzrayim. But haboim sounds as it's lashon hoiva in the present tense, even though they had already been in Mitzrayim for quite some time. Because it was as if they arrived that day, because Yosef had just passed away. The end of Parshas Vayechi, Yosef passes away, and then it says, it's as if they had just arrived to Mitzrayim, because that is when the shibud, that is when the slavery began. So we see that Yosef's presence, Yosef's life, holds off the shibud, the slavery. With regards to Levi, Rashi says, why does the Torah tell us how many years Levi lived? Because from knowing how long Levi lived, we know when the shibud, when the slavery began. Because as long as any of the brothers were alive, the shibud, the slavery, couldn't begin. Like the pasuk says, that Yosef and all of his brothers passed away. And only afterwards could there be a new king, one that will decree and initiate the idea of slavery. The Levi had and Levi lived the longest, and therefore the shibud doesn't start until Levi passes away. The Yisayim Mizah. And even more than that, with regards to Levi, that even before this, that even after the slavery began by most Yidden, where they were experiencing the harshness of the enslavement, the slavery was never imposed on the tribe of Levi. So we see that Levi has something about them, that the fact that Levi was the last one of the brothers shows that Levi is holding off the slavery, and the fact that Levi, even during the slavery, was not obligated to partake in it, shows that Levi represents the antithesis of slavery. So Levi and Yosef have this common denominator, that they represent the opposite of the slavery in Mitzrayim. They transcend, in the letter of his lashon, Beides Anik ben Hecher, both transcend the shibud, the slavery in Mitzrayim. He says, and according to this, it makes a lot of sense that both Levi and Yosef cannot carry the Oren, the casket of Yaakov Avinu. Because the carrying of the Oren of Yaakov is connected with and brings about the slavery, as we said before, that Yaakov was holding it off as long as he was there. So since Yaakov's Oren represents the slavery, Hartis Nitzu Levi v'Yosef. So therefore Levi and Yosef can't connect to it. Because they are the antithesis of the Shibud of Mitzrayim, of the slavery of Mitzrayim. So they can't partake in carrying Yosef's casket, which is what's bringing about the Shibud of Mitzrayim. Und das ist merumas in the time now. And you actually see this concept hidden, alluded to in the reasons that Yaakov gives. Levi the Yisrael losses as Aaron. Levi shouldn't carry the casket because he's going to carry the Aaron of the Mishkan. Yosef the Yisrael Melech, and Yosef shouldn't carry it because he's a king. So the Rebbe says in these words, losses as Aaron, and in the word Shaul Melech, we see the deeper reason why they can't carry the Aaron. Mefarshim Zag and Mefarshim say, the fact that the slavery was not imposed upon Shevet Levi is because of the fact that they're going to carry the Aron. Why did Levi not have to the Shevet Levi? Why did they not have to partake or involve themselves in the actual slave labor? Is connected with the fact that they were going to carry the Aron. Where do we see this? Says the Meferish Hadar Zekenim. The tribe of Levi were wise people, and they didn't want to do the avodah, in the meaning to say the slave labor, because they knew that they were going to carry the Aron. So they said people that are going to be carrying the Aron of Hashem should not be doing slave labor for Mitzrayim. And therefore they actually remained Bnei Chayrin, the well-known medrash that at first Pare tricked them by asking them to get involved willingly and then ultimately became slave labor. Levi never went willingly, saying, how could we, these hands that are going to carry the Aron, have to do slave labor? So in other words, and because of that, they actually remained free throughout. So the fact that they were going to carry the Aron is what did not allow them to become enslaved. So when Rashi brings from Yaakov, Rashi is alluding to the fact, Yaakov is alluding to the fact that because they are people that are not enslaved to Mitzrayim, therefore they can't carry an Aron, a casket that is bringing about, so to speak, Shibud Mitzrayim. Umibald Yosef umelech, and since Yosef is a king, Hot Mitzrayim king shlita of him. Egypt has no rulership, no control over him. The Rabbi is shoylet of Mitzrayim. He, Yosef, as the king, rules in Mitzrayim, like we learned last week in the Sicha of Vayigash. Upshite, as is Kenid Zayin kin Shibud Mitzrayim, and certainly Yosef can't be enslaved to Mitzrayim. So again, this is why Yosef can't carry the Aron. So the question, why do Levi and Yosef not carry them? We don't answer the question why they need Ephraim and Manasseh. But the question, or how Ephraim and Manasseh are their shluchim. But the question is, how could Yosef not carry the Aron, or how could Levi not carry the Aron? The answer is because they represent something that is higher and greater than Galus, and the Aron carrying the Aron represented Galus, and therefore the two couldn't mesh. Mashenkin, going back to the question, why could Moshe carry the remains of Yosef if he's from Shevet Levi and Shevet Levi doesn't carry an Aron? So he says that's Dafka Yankov's Aron. Yaakov's Aron was the precursor to the beginning of the shibut, of the slavery. Whereas with regards to Moshe carrying the remains of Yosef, this was actually a step towards the redemption. The Imera's promise, the Abishur is going to remember you, and you will bring up my remains together with you. In other words, it was part of the Gula, part of going on Mitzrayim, part of being remembered by Hashem was to take Yosef with them. So it's even more connected to Shevet Levi. So Shevet Levi transcends the Shibud. So who should be the one that should partake, that should be involved in Yosef's remains, which is a step towards the Gula? Shevet Levi, the other Rabbi, to the leader of the tribe of Levi, which is Moshe Rabbeinu and Geil Mishal Yisrael, who is the redeemer of the Jewish people. So the fact that Moshe carries Yosef's Aron makes perfect sense, because Moshe is bringing about the Geula, and Yosef's Aron is part of that. So this answers the question very beautifully and very clearly why Yosef and Levi could not carry the Aron of Yaakov. Please don't understand the Dochisa, but if I would ask the question in the other direction, since the reason that Levi and Yosef are not carrying the Aron is because it is antithetical to what they represent. And why do they need shluchim? Why do they need agents or people to stand in their stead? If the whole reason they're doing so is because it's against what they stand for. And how could they have shluchim that are in their place, that are like them? It's as if they themselves are carrying it, if they themselves represent something that is contrary to what Yaakov's Aron stands for. So that's the question. Now he explains so beautifully and so strongly that Levi and Yosef cannot carry the Aron, even though it would have been a schos, and even though it was a commandment from Yaakov Avinu, Unis Asani, nevertheless, they can't actually carry the Aron because it represents something that is contrary to what they stand for. So in that case, why do they need shluchim? How could they have shluchim k'moisam? Let's verstehen, back to my question. So to understand this, we will introduce another question. Since there was a decree at the Bris Ben Abisarim, at the covenant that the Eibishter made with Avraham Avinu, that your children, your offspring, will be a stranger in a land that isn't theirs. They will enslave them, they will persecute them. Over 400 years. How is it possible that one of the Shvatim, that there should be a tribe that doesn't have the slavery imposed upon them? The slavery was part of a prophecy from the Eibishter, from God Almighty, to Avram. So how could Hashem's prophecy not be fulfilled with one of the Shvatim? Nochmer, in the Shibud is doch gewen, in the slavery upon the slavery was dependent the promise that afterwards they will leave with great wealth. The Rashi brings, as Rashi says, Avram, that the tzaddik Avram shouldn't say that Hashem fulfilled his prophecy of slavery and persecution, but did not fulfill the prophecy of they will go out with great wealth. So you see that the two are intertwined. So how could Levi not partake in this in the slavery when, first of all, it was a prophecy from Hashem, and all of a sudden it's not being fulfilled? More importantly, how do they get to the end result without going through the process of the slavery? So in other words, the question is, how is it possible that there should be a segment of Klal Yisrael that would not experience slavery? So in Sif Zayin, the Rebbe explains this in a very, very beautiful way. That Levi did experience the slavery, or were part of the slavery, just not by actual slave labor. The fact that Levi did not actually have to work, did not actually have to do slave labor, is it's not because they were not connected, they weren't part of the exile in Mitzrayim. Nor does Gufa is a praten the Mefen HaShibut von Eden. They're not being enslaved was actually part of the overall enslavement of the Jewish people. How does that work? What do you mean? They weren't doing slave labor, but they were taking part in the enslavement. How does that work? So the Rebbe explains. The intent of the enslavement in Mitzrayim was certainly not, in other words, Hashem's intent, was certainly not to torture the Yidden. It was for the purpose of the ascent that would come afterwards, and I will lift you up from Mitzrayim. The advantage or the ascension that comes because of it. The purpose of going down into Mitzrayim was because afterwards they would reach much greater heights. Mitzrayim is given akura barza. Mitzrayim was like a cauldron. V'akur kipshutay. Just like a cauldron refines metals, so too the experience of Mitzrayim refined the Jewish people. So you have to know that when the Eibishter puts Yidden in Mitzrayim, it's not to hurt them, it's actually to bring them, to refine them and bring them to the next level. However, because of the harshness of the slavery, it was possible as that not only would the Yidden not reach this next level, they could be plunged into the depravity of Mitzrayim. You put Yidden in Galus, and you make them work very, very hard. They get distracted from all of the holiness and the spirituality that's going on around them, or that could go on around them, and they get stuck. The Rebbe from them Shibud, and therefore Hashem needed there should be one category of Jewish people that remain above the actual slavery. And they should inspire the Jewish people as they to fulfill the purpose of the descent of the slavery, that they will ultimately go up to the next level. They will go out with great wealth, which is also practical, which has a practical meaning and also a spiritual meaning, that they would refine the entire Mitzrayim. Das ist die Aufgabe von Shevet Levi, and this was the mission of Shevet Levi. So just to understand what we're holding in Siv Zayin, the number one, Hashem sent the Yidden down into Mitzrayim for the purpose of the ascent that would come after it, and in order to make sure that we don't get stuck in Mitzrayim, the Eibishter left one Shevet that would continually inspire the Jewish people throughout the slavery to know that there is a happy ending afterwards. There is there's an ascension that comes after the descent. And who was this group of people that were constantly inspiring the Yidden? This was the mission of Shevet Levi. The Ramban is Mevar, as the Ramban explains, as minig b'chol am, that every nation has a tradition. That they have wise men, wise people, that teach their Torah. Which is why Pari allowed Shevet Levi to not be enslaved. Because Shevet Levi were the wise people and the elderly, the older sages. But really it was all reason from Hashem. Really everything came from Hashem. That the fact that Pari did not enslave Shevet Levi was so that the Yidden should be the Chachamim and the Zekanim to inspire the Jewish people through the Shibud. And this is the answer to the question why Levi did not have to actually do slave labor, even though Hashem had prophesied to Avram that there's going to be an enslavement. Because it doesn't mean that not every Yid took part in the enslavement in Mitzrayim. The Yidden came to Mitzrayim as one nation, as one people. Ein Mitzias, one unit. As the pasuk says, the soul that came to Mitzrayim was 70. It used the term nefesh lashon yachid, implying that they came as one unit. But then they had to create a partnership how to survive the enslavement. When you have a partnership, each one does their part also for the other partner. The Yisayim is or a better example. The Evre HaNefesh VaGuf was Milu Tafkidi von jeden Evre von the Atzmai is for dem ganzen Nefesh und B'Slichusay, that when you have a body and every limb has to do its part, so it's doing its part for the entire body and in the agency of all the other limbs. When the nose is breathing in air, it's doing so for the whole body. When the eyes are seeing, it's doing so for the whole body, etc., etc. So there was a partnership where different parts of the Jewish people were doing different things. Together, they were experiencing Shibud. By some of the Yidden, the slavery was in actuality, which was necessary in order to reach the ascent that would come afterwards. Und Shevet Levi hat sich in dem Stadt gewesen, und Shevet Levi hat sich in dem Stadt gewesen, durch dem Kayach. And Shevet Levi, their participation in the enslavement was not by the actual slave labor, but by the inspiration and by the strength that they gave to the others. Zaydik Moire L'Chobne Yisrael Torah, being Torah teachers to all the other Yidden, after Nishke Ver Chazon and Kushi Yeshiva, to not become stuck in the harshness of the slavery. The Adrabe, the Grechin Adam Ilui, Shadei Shibud, and on the contrary, to reach this next level that they were able to reach because of the slavery. So the answer to the question is that Shevet Levi was part of the enslavement in Mitzrayim, but not by actually doing slave labor, but by inspiring the others who were at risk of getting stuck in Mitzrayim because of the harshness of the slave labor that they were subjected to. And just to support this concept, this is the same thing that Shevet Levi continues to do after they go out of Mitzrayim, after they receive the Torah in the Midbar, and even after they enter into Eretz Yisrael. Shevet Levi at Nitke Chelek v'Nachal in Eretz Yisrael, they did not receive an actual portion in Eretz Yisrael. They were designated to serve Hashem, l'sharsei, to worship Him, and to teach His upright ways and His just laws to the multitudes. Havayu Nachalase, the Eibishter, God Almighty, is the portion of Shevet Levi. And this was expressed in the most literal sense that they actually served in the Mishkan, including carrying the Aron. And this service in the Mishkan came because everybody was needed, and everybody needed what the Mishkan. Everybody was needed for the Mishkan, and the Levim represented everyone as their shluchim to do what needed to be done. When the Aveda whereas the Aveda of working with the world and making this world a dwelling place for Hashem, Zayin Dikin Welt, while being inside of this world, which is the only way to actually transform the world and make it a dwelling place for Hashem, was accomplished by all the other Shvatim. So the Shvatim did the part of working in the world, and the Shevet Levi did the part of representing them in the Mishkan. And because of that, Shevet Levi received all of the advantages, all of the ascensions that were brought about because of the slavery, because they were part of it, just not in the same exact way as the rest of the Shvat. So we asked in the beginning of Sif Vav, why did Levi and Yosef need shluchim to carry the Aron? And how could the shluchim even represent them, shluchim kimoisam? So we said we'll understand that by first explaining this other question: how does Levi not do slave labor in Mitzrayim? And we answered that there was a partnership between Levi and the other Shvatim. The Shvatim did the slave labor, which was necessary in order to reach the higher levels that were waiting for them on the other side of Mitzrayim, on the other side of the slavery. But Shevet Levi was needed as their partner to be there to inspire them and to teach them Torah, that they should actually reach that higher level and not get bogged down in the harshness of the Shibud. So now we have to go back to the question. Based on this, we can now answer the question: why do Levi and Yosef need shluchim to represent them, and how could they have shluchim if they are the antithesis of the Aron of Yaakov? But based on what we had just explained, what was Levi's part in the Shibud Mitzrayim, we'll understand why Levi and Yosef need that Menashe and Ephraim should take their place in carrying the casket of Yaakov. Even though they themselves do not actually carry the Aron of Yaakov, as we explained before, because they represent something that is antithetical to the Aron of Yaakov, which represents Galus. Hoppen sie Obergedarf reingeben dem Kayach von sein Hecher von Shibud Mitzrayim in the Ibrike Shvatim, but they still had to inspire, they had to still give them the strength of their transcendence over Shibud Mitzrayim. Und das ist durch dem, was Shluchim seinen sich mishtatev in Nesiyas and initial Yankiv, and that will be done through their messengers, through their agents, partaking in the carrying of Yaakov. In other words, on the one hand, they themselves can't carry it because they transcend the concept of Galus. But on the other hand, their job as transcendent to Galus is to inspire and give strength to the Yidden that are in the Galus itself, and therefore they need to send in Shluchim, that despite the fact that they transcend Galus, but they have to send in Shluchim to inspire the Yidden who are carrying the Oren. And this is why Yaakov chooses Menashe and Ephraim. Because Menashe and Ephraim are the continuity of Yosef and Levi. In other words, they're Kayach von Yosef and Levi. This strength that Yosef and Levi have, that to transcend the Shibud of Mitzrayim, it is brought down into the Aveda in Galus, which is represented by Menashe and Ephraim. Especially since this is how it happened in real life. As Menashe and Ephraim sind geboren geworden in Eretz Mitzrayim, und Ede Yankiv ist dort angekommen, that Menashe and Ephraim were born in Mitzrayim before Yaakov comes there. So they were born into this reality that Galus is real and that Galus is difficult. And therefore, they are the ones that could serve as the shluchim of Yosef and Levi to go into Mitzrayim and yet to transcend the Galus, or to have the Kayach to transcend the Galus, even while being in Mitzrayim. So, this answers the question that we asked, why do Yosef and Levi need shluchim? Very simple, because transcending Galus is not enough. This transcendence has to be lowered down and brought down into the lives of the Shvatim, and that was done through their shluchim that were already inside of Mitzrayim, so to speak, Ephraim and Menashe, that they could carry this inspiration to the rest of the Shvatim. We still didn't explain the connection of Ephraim and Menashe to Levi specifically. We said Ephraim and Menashe are children of Yosef, so we see how they carry on Yosef's mission. But what about Levi? So the Rebbe is going to explain that Menashe and Ephraim, he just explained that Menashe and Ephraim carry on the Yosef and Levi, and Menashe and Ephraim respectively will explain how they're different, and they represent the difference between Levi and Yosef. And till now we saw Levi and Yosef as representing the same idea. They're both higher than Galus. In the next Seif, the Rebbe is going to separate the difference between Levi and Yosef. That Yosef never actually became part of Shibud Mitzrayim, whereas Shevet Levi actually lived through Shibud Mitzrayim. So it's a very different way of interacting with Galus, and the Rebbe is going to explain that Ephraim and Menashe represent the two different approaches of Levi and Yosef. Since Yosef and Levi are two separate approaches in the Meheder HaShaychat Shibud Mitzrayim, in their lack of connection to Shibud Mitzrayim, Kidul Lekamon, as we will explain in Sif Tes, the Rebbe's are an Eichim and Bazundere Shluchim Menashe and Ephraim. Therefore, they needed to have two separate agents, Menashe and Ephraim, that will each represent and serve as the shliach of Levi and Yosef, consistent with their avodah. It says these are the children of Yaakov, Yosef. It's explained that the ideas, the spiritual ideas of Yaakov are brought down into this world through Yosef. By Yosefin, Mitzrayim is Meir Madrigas Yankov Begila by Yosef, even as he has descended into Mitzrayim, still the level of Yaakov shines in a revealed way. And since in the Aveda of Yosef, in Yosef's service of Hashem, there is a revealed energy from Yaakov that transcends Mitzrayim is Mitzad Yosef Nitokin Art Avanel invested from Mitzrayim. And from Yosef's perspective, there's no space for the concealment of Mitzrayim. Yosef rules over Egypt and does not allow Mitzrayim to conceal any of this light or any of this positivity. In other words, Yosef transcends Mitzrayim in a way that Mitzrayim doesn't exist. At least the shibud of Mitzrayim doesn't exist. Yosef is carrying the light of Yaakov in a revealed way, and on that level there's no Mitzrayim. There's no darkness, there's no slavery, there's nothing. Mashenkin Shevet Levi said a nit given Shevet Mitzrayim, whereas the tribe of Levi did not rule over Mitzrayim. Seine given Insman from Golus Mitzrayim, Bizensman for Kershia Shibud. They lived through the time of Golus. They lived through the time of the hardship of the slavery. And nevertheless, they did not drown in it. They did not become stuck in it. On the contrary, it was from them that they actually received the strength to overcome the hardship of the slavery canal, as we explained in the previous Seifim. Until they could reach the greater light that comes because of the darkness. So much so that the redemption came through Shevet Levi, Moshe and Aaron, who are from Shevet Levi. In short, Levi gives us the strength to transform the Golus. So Yosef is higher than Golus. And from and Yosef's level, there is no Golus. Levi is not higher than Golus. Levi goes into Golus and changes the Golus into Geula. So that's the difference in Yosef and Levi. Yes, in both of them, they are contrary to the concept of shibud, of slavery, but in two different ways. Yosef remains above it. Levi goes down into it and changes it. Und von die zwei Jahren kommen Aruis in und durch ihre Shluchim die zwei Efane Aveda von Menashe befreien. And these two approaches can be carried out through their shluchim, Menashe Ephraim, because they too represent two different approaches in Aveda. Kimerum is in their name, and as it is alluded to in their names, V'geretam al Barucha, as we learned previously. We learned this in Chelek Tesvav, a whole sikha about Ephraim and Menashe, and the Rebbe is going to go through it over here in short, but still with very, very gishmak eisius. And Menashe and Ephraim, the Rebbe is going to explain how they represent two different Avedas as that are consistent with Yosef and Levi, respectively. Menashe was nikra kach ki nashani elikim es kalam olivis kol beisavi. Menashe was named Menashe because you made me forget all of my hardships and my father's house. And Nomen was their month as er gefin sich in an Ort was macht vergessen es kol beisavi. Menashe is a name that reminds the person that he finds himself in a place that is trying to make him forget his father's home. Und der Vater darf wegspringen davon, and therefore he has to jump away from it. He has to protect himself. He has to stay away from the space that wants him to forget his father's house. Das Drichtu ist ein Tschuke, nicht zu vergessen. Menashe represents the desire and the resolution to never forget. Nor zu sein zugebunden zu Beis Avi, but rather to remain constantly connected to his father's house. But das is the Reifen Aveda, was heart of it af, nicht zu bewegt werden von der Sviva. So what is this Aveda? He works upon himself to not be influenced by his surroundings, durch bleiben zugebunden zu Beis Avi, by remaining connected to his father's house. Aid, sein dich in Golus, der Mann sich geseder, als gefindt sich in der Matze, was will machen vergessen Beis Avi. Aid, being in Golus, has to constantly remind himself that he's in a place that wants him to forget his father's house. Und das Gufe peilt, as soll nicht vergessen. And this constant knowledge that something is trying to make you forget, that is what makes you not forget. And der Herr, das ist nicht sein Mokim. He realizes that this place that he's in is not his place. Sein Ort is in Beis Avi Melech. He belongs in his father's house, in the king's palace. That's where he belongs. So Menashe represents the person that's constantly fighting to not succumb to Golus that's trying to make him forget. And because of that, he constantly remembers his father's house. And because of that, he constantly remains connected to his father's house. Masim to the Aveda von Yosef. And this is consistent with Aveda of Yosef. But because Yosef of Mitzrayim, by him, he was experiencing and feeling it. The Ashpa von Yaakov based Avi was his Hecher for Golus, the Hesel, the Helm of Mitzrayim, which transcends Golus, which transcends the darkness and the concealment of Mitzrayim. So Yosef is doing the same thing as Menashe. Yosef is not allowing Mitzrayim to affect him. Just like Menashe is constantly fighting to not lose connection with his father's house, so to Yosef is carrying Yaakov's oil, Yaakov's light with him. The Rebbe adds here in the parentheses, in the brackets, as mehai time had Yosef getainet loy chein avi kizah b'cher simi min chal reishay. The Yosef says to Yaakov, "This not so, my father. Put your right hand on the head of Menashe. He is the b'cher. He is the older one. Mitzad der aveda von Yosef is the ikar aveda of Menashe. Yosef is fighting for Menashe because from Yosef's perspective, that's the main aveda. The main aveda is to not become affected by the galus, to retain the connection to Beis Avi, to his father's house. So Menashe is Yosef's shliach, because Menashe represents not forgetting and remaining connected, and then meaning to say not lowering oneself down all the way into the darkness of Mitzrayim, which is the idea of Yosef that we said before. Yosef remains above Mitzrayim. He's the ruler of Mitzrayim. Whereas Ephraim is called so because you multiplied me in the land of my affliction. Ephraim represents the transformation and the growth that happens because they're in the darkness. So much so that it is multiplied. It is much greater. Von Shevet Levi, so the Aveda of Ephraim, that it doesn't remain above the galus. Menashe remains constantly connected to his father's house. Ephraim says, I can't afford that. I have to go down into Mitzrayim in order to bring out the gains that could be had in Mitzrayim and to multiply within the land of my affliction. So therefore, Ephraim goes down into the galus and fights it and elevates it. Und die Aveda kommt und wird nicht Teil von der Aveda von Shevet Levi. This Aveda stems from the Aveda of Shevet Levi, was bekeichen und beschnuchos von Mediden übergemacht im Cheshach HaGalus, which was in their with their strength and in their agency that the Yidden were able to transform the Galus, v'chasher ya'anu oisai, as they inflicted pain upon them, so they will multiply and so they will grow. So this is why you have two shluchim, Ephraim and Menashe. Menashe represents the Aveda of Yosef. Ephraim represents the Aveda of Levi. And with that, we've answered all our questions. Just to briefly go through the questions, we asked, how does Levi connect to Ephraim and Menashe? But it's understood that Levi and Yosef both represent the antithesis of Galus, because Levi goes down into Galus, and Levi transforms the Galus from within, and therefore that is the Aveda of Ephraim. Why could Moshe carry the Aron of Yosef? Because the Aron of Yaakov represented Galus. Levi and Yosef couldn't carry it. But the Aron of Moshe, the Aron of Yosef, which represents Geula, that could be, and on the contrary, has to be carried by Moshe Rabbeinu, by the tribe of Levi. Why do Levi and Yosef need shluchim if they transcend Galus? The answer is to be able to bring what they represent into the world of the rest of the Yidden. They needed shluchim, such as Ephraim and Menashe, that would carry that down to the rest of the Yidden. And why did Levi not experience Golus Mitzrayim? The answer is that he did experience the Golus Mitzrayim, but he experienced it by learning Torah and by inspiring the other Yidden that were actually involved in the slave labor. And Sif Yud, the Rebbe concludes, Estate Nea Katsen Yosef. He leads like sheep Yosef. Eden veren angerufen b'shem Yosef. This is in this pasuk, the Yidden are the sheep. So the Yidden are referred to as by the name of Yosef. Similarly, with regards to the tribe of Levi, the Rambam writes, the Rambam says that just like Shevet Levi, every year, every person that contributes his spirit can become holy, and Hashem could be his portion. So we see that the Yidden are called Levi and are called Yosef. Every Yid has this strength of Yosef and Levi to stand above, higher than Galus. Not only it should not control the Yid, of Galus, but quite the contrary, the Yid becomes the Balabais. The Yid becomes the a Yid owns the Galus. When and you have both levels. First comes the present, where Yosef is the king, and then from Galus we stand higher than Galus. Without being affected by the challenges from Galus. And then you have what's going to be in the future. When we reach a higher level, such as Levi, that in the future is going to carry the Aron. When we have the Torah, which is the Luchis, which was in the Aron, which is the idea of the light of Torah, we can transform the darkness of the Galus to light. As the Pasuk says, that we have more light when it comes. There's additional light when it comes to the darkness. When the Torah illuminates my darkness. But which will be revealed with the coming of Mashiach, when we'll be able to fulfill the promise of the Eibishter, that the night will shine like the day, made of Mamish.